Heyo, I'm in the middle of something. Baby girl, you can't sit on my lap right now, sweetie. I'm sorry, can you go somewhere else? Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking all about the care of this beautiful thing right here, the EPIPREMNUM AMPLISSIMUM, and how I keep mine happy and healthy. So if you want to know more about this gorgeous plant, stick around, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Before I get into it though, I just want to say if you are new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet, so if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you're not new here, welcome back. I appreciate you joining us again. Right, let's get into it. So the EPIPREMNUM AMPLISSIMUM is an epipremnum, obviously, and it's kind of like a cousin of the classic golden pothos or Epipremnum aurum, marble queen, all of those, as well as a cousin to the Epipremnum pinnatum, skeleton key, sable blue, stuff like that. And it grows fairly similar to those, but there are a few key differences. One is this insane leaf shape. Like, look how gorgeous and long and skinny these are. This one specifically is an EPIPREMNUM AMPLISSIMUM silver stripe, but there's a plain green form as well, and I've also seen variegated versions of the plain green form. But oh my god, when I first saw this plant, I knew I needed to have it. It kind of, to me, looks like an in-between of a Synapsis moonlight with like a Dracaena or an Aglaonema. Like, these long silvery stripy leaves are just magnificent. I could stare at this thing all day, and I am so glad that I added it to my collection. It is fairly easy care. I tend to not pay attention to this one too much, and it seems pretty perfectly happy. I'm super excited that they're becoming more common as well. Like, I've been seeing them pop up in a whole bunch of plant shops, at least in the UK lately, and so they're a bit more accessible, and that's great because they are such easy plants. For these ones, bright indirect light is ideal. They like to be fairly close to sort of an east-facing window. Getting a little bit of morning sun is fine, or a little bit of dappled sun is fine, but you really don't want to give them prolonged hours of like bright, harsh afternoon sun, especially in the summer, or if you bring them outside. They're not going to tolerate direct sun. It can scorch their leaves. They can also tolerate a little bit lower light, though they can grow slower and grow leggy from that. So it just depends on how you want your plant to grow. Personally, mine lives in a spot that basically gets little to no natural light. Because of that, I have a grow light on it, I think 12 hours a day, and it seems to be perfectly happy with that. They can tolerate grow light if you can't give them adequate, like, natural ambient light. So seems pretty happy, and I can't complain about it, so I'm just gonna keep it where it is and carry on. Because it is an epipremnum, they tend to be pretty chill when it comes to watering. They don't really get that fussy, and they're not gonna complain too much about it. I tend to water mine when mine's like 50 to 75% dry. Sometimes I let it get 100% dry as well, just depending on my crazy schedule and whether or not I've gotten a chance to water it. They will let you know if they get thirsty. They will droop down, and you could let it get to that often if you want, but it's not going to be the healthiest for the plant, and underwatering can cause damage, like irreparable damage to the plant. Like mine, it's got like a bare section around the middle here, and that's because I underwatered it at some point. Gosh, I swear, like in the last 6 months or so, and I basically lost all of these leaves. Like, it was just so wilty and sad, and all of these leaves had yellowed and fell off, and so I kind of just have to live with the fact that it's a bit bare at the bottom, but the top is still looking great. I have since been a bit more on top of watering this one and making sure that it's nice and happy and not getting too dry. Overwatering is another massive cause of death in amplissimums. Overwatering is mostly about frequency, not about amount of water. So when you do water, make sure you water nice and thoroughly until it's draining out of the drainage holes at the bottom. But like, don't let it sit in it, and don't water again too soon, because that can lead to root rot and your plant dying, and we don't want that. I definitely recommend you water your Amplissumum on more of a soil dryness schedule rather than a time-based schedule, because it is going to change depending on the time of year, your home, the weather, and all of that. And so it's kind of hard to say an exact amount of time between which you should be watering. Focus on soil dryness and you should be fine. Amplissumums should be okay in your home, in just like your natural home temperatures, though they do prefer to be a bit more on the warmer side. Somewhere between 20 to 30 degrees Celsius or 70 to 85 Fahrenheit tends to be their ideal. They can tolerate a little bit lower, but they definitely prefer the warmer. My home is quite cold right now in the winter in the UK. My home will get as low as like 15 degrees at night. And that's probably the lowest I would allow my Amplissumum to get. Anything lower than that and it can suffer with cold damage. But when my home's like 15 to 18 degrees in the winter right now, it tends to be okay, and it's still growing a little bit, so it can't be that upset, but I would definitely prefer keeping it warmer if I possibly could. You can also summer your Amplissumum outside if you live in a nice warm climate. But if you do, you want to make sure you're bringing it in before the temperatures drop again come autumn. And you want to make sure that you're not putting it in direct sunlight because that'll scorch the leaves. But I think they probably really enjoy being outside in the summer, getting some nice fresh air. Amplissumums do prefer it to be a little bit more humid. Their ideal is between 50 and 60%, which personally, my home is that naturally. I'm quite lucky that I have a fairly humid home. I think it might be because, one, I live in the UK, which is quite humid, and two, I have tons of plants. And grouping plants together naturally boosts humidity in the area, especially after watering day. But if you do need to boost the humidity for your Amplissumum, like I said, you can group it with other things. You could get a humidifier, especially if you've got multiple other houseplants that like humidity. That is a really good option. Or you can think about something like a pebble tray to give it a little bit more moisture in the surrounding areas. I should also note that because mine is on a sphagnum moss pole, that tends to stay damp, which increases the general humidity in the area as well. So that does generally help with the humidity of this plant. I tend to fertilize my Amplissumum maybe like every other water or so. They're not too picky with it. Of course, that's going to be more often in the summer because you're watering it more often, and less often in the winter. But you can completely stop fertilizing in the winter if your growth is slowing or stopping. I would definitely suggest not giving it extra fertilizer, because too much fertilizer can cause root burn in the soil and root area. So it's best to be avoided. If your plant stops growing, stop feeding it. But if you live in a sort of artificial houseplanty climate like I do, with grow lights and humidity and warm temperatures, your plant very well could continue growing, and so you could continue fertilizing as well. I use liquid gold leaf fertilizer with this one, and it seems to really like it. It is a houseplant focused fertilizer, so I don't dilute it to half strength or anything. If you're using a more all-purpose fertilizer, I would definitely suggest diluting it, because they can be a bit harsh on houseplants, so just beware if you're using something else. I also want to note that I do put fertilizer in my moss pole when I'm watering it as well, to add nutrients to the roots in here, but I'll talk about that a little bit later when I get into the support section of this video. Well-draining soil is a must for EPIPREMNUM amplissumums. Like I've said, they don't like water just staying around their roots too intensely, so having something with a lot of perlite or bark would be a good idea for these. I think the soil that I have mine in right now is Monstera and Philodendron soil from Soil Ninja, which is coco coir, perlite, worm castings, activated charcoal, zeolite, pumice, and orchid bark, which I think it really likes. I've actually added extra orchid bark to it as well, because I want to make sure that it's very well draining. Because I'm adding moisture to the moss pole, I want to make sure that the soil drains as much as possible, so I'm not overwatering it too frequently, because I'm watering the moss pole much more frequently than I am the soil. You want to repot your amplissumum when you notice that the roots have grown out of the drainage holes of the pot. Personally, I've not had that yet. I think I've had this one maybe 6 to 9 months so far, and I've not needed to repot it past this. I did put it in a new pot when I got it, because I wanted to put it on a different moss pole, but it seems to be perfectly fine, and I don't think I'm gonna repot this one unless it starts growing crazily this next year. It should be fine, but if you do repot, you wanna make sure that you are repotting one size up, so like 1 inch or 2 centimeters more, and in a pot with drainage holes, because that is very important, and unless you're really, really good at watering, it's pretty much essential. Having some sort of support is really going to keep your EPIPREMNUM amplissumums happy. They do like to climb in nature. They are seen climbing up trees, and so giving it something to support itself is kind of essential, more so than it is with something like a golden pothos. I haven't really seen these trailing down, and I've almost exclusively seen them being sold on some sort of pole or support as it is. This one came on a coco coir pole. That would have been fine. I could have just left it on that, but personally I wanted to switch it to a sphagnum moss pole. I got it on one of my D-shaped moss poles. I think this one is from Grow Vertical, and it seems to really like that. There's definitely some places where you can see the roots growing through the back, and it is very supported in there, and it seems to be growing very happily. It is at the top now. I probably need to give it a pole extension fairly soon. One of the main reasons that I like the sphagnum moss poles is because you can keep it moist and fertilize it, and doing so allows the like aerial roots to get nutrients and water and help it grow a bit more strong and mature. So that's why I prefer that to a coir pole, because they don't have that possibility. At the moment I'm watering my pole maybe every 2 or 3 days, maybe once a week. I think it just depends a little bit on how lazy I'm being, but I try to water it once I notice that it's getting on the drier side. In fact, I probably could water this now. It's kind of hard to explain when to water it, just because I've just gotten so used to it over time. But it's like when the moss isn't soaking wet, but just damp, like not hydrophobic dry, because that makes it harder to water, but also not like sopping wet. It's kind of a middle ground is when you want to be watering it. I water it using the cup method, where you get a plastic cup and you poke holes in the bottom of it and put that on top of the moss pole, and then you can put your water or fertilizer water or anything like that into the cup and let it drain down into the pole. And it takes a little bit of trial and error to figure out how much it takes to go down to the bottom of the pole without going into the soil, because you don't want to be watering the soil that frequently. But eventually you will get there and figure out what your plant needs, because it is a little bit of testing time to figure out what your plant likes the most. Propagating amplissumums is pretty easy. You can do so with node cuttings. So you want to take some clean, sharp scissors or a knife or something and cut just below a node. Plop that in your substrate of choice. That can be water, moss, perlite, whatever you like. I personally would probably use moss if I was propagating mine at the minute. And then once it's grown roots, you can put it into some soil, and there you go. You've got a new EPIPREMNUM amplissumum. It's so easy. Unfortunately, amplissumums are toxic to humans and pets, so ideally keep it out of reach of your kids and your cats and dogs and stuff. You don't want them eating this plant, because it could cause irritations to the mouth and digestive system, excessive drooling, vomiting, stuff like that, so best to be avoided if you can. So that is it. That is everything you need to know about this lovely EPIPREMNUM amplissumum plant. Honestly, I really, really love this thing, and I'm glad that I've been able to keep it happy in my home, and hopefully now you will be able to as well. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on any other houseplants you'd like me to talk about in the future, and hopefully I can make that happen for you. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!